Bill Mullins, thanks for coming on the pod. We talked a little bit beforehand about where you started in your career. Of course, I tell everybody, like, save it for the pod.
Yeah.
I want it to be an organic conversation. I don't want to, I don't want it to start out and me be in the middle of it and then start recording. So,
But wait, there's more.
there's more. So with that being said, you were telling me you did not start out in culinary. Of course, I know you. Let me give you the folks at home a little backstory. When I first joined Freemasonry here in Memphis, my mentor, Richard, at the time was telling me, hey, it's a good idea if you can to go visit these other lodges and watch the degrees. And then you kind of learn more, because when you go through, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. Your mouth gets wet, but you don't get any water, down the throat. So, you're still learning a lot. Of course, with Freemasonry, there's a lot of memorization work, and it's really helpful to go and see. And then every time you see one, just about, you hear something you didn't hear the first time, or you see something you didn't see the first time, and you're like, oh, that makes sense now. Okay, that makes sense. And he would always tell me, when Park Avenue has something, we're going to get down there, because Bill Mullins is a chef. He's an amazing chef, and he's going to have great food, and so on and so forth. And so we get down to Park for an EA degree. And again, I'm still very new to Masonry. It was one of the first degrees I saw. And the meal that night was like spaghetti with canned sauce, and the bread was like sliced bread that they had put some garlic butter on. Don't get me wrong, solid meal. I'm not knocking the meal at all, but I was like, I don't know if this executive chef is the same thing that I was thinking of. But then it turns out you did not make the meal that
Just
night.
to be clear, that was not my meal. That's right.
You. But you are a chef. You're more than a chef. You're a whole lot of things. And not just in the Masonic world, which obviously I think everybody in the Masonic world is going to know you for a plethora of different things. You're a part of a lot of different things. Obviously very active in your Blue Lodge, very active in the Scottish Rite that I know of, and the York Rite. I mean, there's just several things that you are a part of. So, but tell me let's talk a little bit more about you first. So you started out in law enforcement?
So I had a weird career path.
Okay.
In high school, I was dead set and determined that I was going to go into law enforcement. I was in Law Enforcement Explorers with the Sheriff's Department in Oktibbeha County, which, if you're familiar, that's Starkville, Mississippi. So I grew up there. I was born there. I had many friends growing up in Law Enforcement Explorers, loved it, thought it was the greatest thing. We had an academy down in Gulfport, Mississippi. It was the Law Enforcement Explorers Academy. I did that 3 years in a row and loved it, absolutely, just fell in love with that. While I was in college at Mississippi State, because it's an obligation, you have to go to Mississippi State if you grow up in Starkville, I worked graveyard shift for the police department. I worked in the dispatch center. So I worked as a jailer at the sheriff's department during that time as well, some of the crossover time. And, I really enjoyed that, and it got me through college.
So you did all this while you were in college?
While I was in college.
So you're telling me that a college student worked a full-time job and was able to get himself through and still be able to maintain his education?
Yeah.
Wow.
It can be done.
What a concept.
It's incredible.
What a concept. Your parents weren't paying for everything the whole way?
My parents helped me out, but
Well,
I paid for my own pretty much living expenses at that point. I mean, they helped me out with the tuition initially, but I paid for everything else. But the coolest thing about that was I wasn't even interested in criminology at the time. I was in electrical engineering when I first started college. So I had gotten all my math. I knocked out calculus. I knocked out differential equations, statistics. I knocked all that out, and then changed my major to sociology with an emphasis in correctional systems. Wow. So I went completely different.
That is a whole different spectrum.
Yeah. And to this day, I'm a firm believer that statistics just lie to you. So, and I know how to do them, but I hate doing them.
Well, statistics, I heard, are they're right 80% of the time, 60% of the time.
Yes.
So,
Well, 98% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So
yeah, 100%.
yeah, 100%. I decided that I was going to go that route. And when I graduated college, I still worked for the police department. I actually transferred to the sheriff's department at that point, was working in the jail. And, it was just a situation where I'd had an injury. I got laid up while I was working. I'm sitting there in the dispatch center with an injury. I can't really do anything. I can't, go out on rides with the officers. I can't do any of that stuff. So I started looking at other educational opportunities as well because I'm a lifelong student. And I ended up getting my EMT license. And as my injury is healing, I'm doing more and more ride-alongs with the ambulances in the area, and really enjoyed that. Found out I really liked that. An opening came up for a dispatch job in Tyler, Texas. I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. Tyler, Texas. You have to throw the extra Y in there. And it was with East Texas Medical Center, EMS, and I applied for it. I didn't think I was going to get it, but they called me, flew me out there, and next thing you know, I'm moving up to Tyler. And I spent several years in Texas, and some of my best years I spent in Texas.
That makes so much more sense now because I always see you wearing a cowboy hat. And no knock to anybody that decides to wear a cowboy hat. But every time I see somebody with a cowboy hat, and I know they're not from Texas, which I don't know why Texas, to me in my mind, they have to be from Texas. But it just is Texas is a different world almost. The America is very large. For anybody that's outside the country doesn't realize how big our actual country is. But Texas is literally it's a whole different place.
Yeah, Texas is the size of most regular countries outside the U.S.
Yeah. And when you go to Texas, the one thing you notice, well, if you're like me, you notice very quickly, Texans love Texas. I've never seen so many state flags flying in any other state that I've been to, and I've been to a bunch of them, than I have in Texas. And they don't fly like small flags. They're flying like what you would see above, the Capitol building, in Atlanta or in Nashville or something. I mean, it's a very large at a car dealership
in Collierville.
At a car dealership, they're flying like the biggest Texan flags, and then below it they have a smaller American flag. So the cowboy hat now does make a lot of sense.
Well, it's an amalgam of several different things, actually. It's an homage to my time in Texas. But a few years ago, I was in a little town called Brundage, Alabama. My sister lives there, and my mother was in bad health. And one day I had a cowboy hat with me my sister had given me for some reason. And my mother said she really liked me in the hat, said I looked really good in a hat. So after she passed, now I kind of wear it because of her, but now it's become part of me. It's just,
it's abnormal to not see you with it.
Yeah.
To be honest. And so we actually talked about it before we started, and you were like, should I wear the hat? Should I not wear the hat? And, it's up to you, but to me, it's so much, I see you with it so much that, and outside of the lodge, I feel like it's normal Bill to see him with a hat. Inside the lodge, obviously it's a little different, but so that's kind of interesting. Didn't
and
realize
I'm
I'd be
probably the
tearing up
only
about a
chef
story.
you'll ever see that wears a cowboy hat,
That's
even in the
probably true
kitchen.
too. So, okay, so you're in Texas. How long did you stay down there?
All told, about maybe 3 or 4 years, I guess, but not always with EMS. At some point, the adage that you light the candle at both ends? Well, I did. I lit the candle at both ends and then immediately took a flamethrower to the center of the candle. And working in the kind of environment that I was in, it's equivalent to pushing 10. If you're familiar with the terminology, it's what they call air traffic controllers, how they push planes around. It was, I think, 33 counties of East Texas that we covered, a huge swath of East Texas, the majority of East Texas, actually. Several hundred ambulances, 5 or 6 helicopters. It was a big thing. So even in the middle of the night, the calls never really stopped. And that could play a psychological toll on you. Dealing with the worst parts of humanity, dealing with the worst things. I remember several calls as I'm sitting there one night. This woman calls in from Athens, Texas. I remember it very clearly. And she said that her husband was choking. And I asked her, I said, well, what's he choking on? Is he breathing first? That was my main concern. Is he getting air? Yeah, he's breathing. He's doing okay, but he just can't seem to stop choking. Well, what's he choking on? The zip tie that I tied around his neck.
Get out of town.
So at that point, I'm like, I'm going to mark this tape because I have a feeling we're coming back to this at some point in the future. So it's things like that. And, but I think the suicide calls were the worst.
Yeah.
They warn you when you're doing this, and unfortunately, they don't give you enough psychological training when you're in this field.
Yeah, I have family that, was in law enforcement growing up, and my mother retired from the sheriff's department where I'm from. And, the stories that you hear of these, I would say poor officers, poor firefighters, poor EMTs, they have to go into a house at Thanksgiving or Christmas, because that's when most suicides happen, and find, a mom or dad who have, unalived themselves with a shotgun or, a rope or whatever it might have been. And they've got little kids, and they are the ones that might have found them. And those stories of hearing, of that, and just me knowing, I felt like I grew up with several people I knew that had committed suicide. And I don't know, maybe it's just my age or the generation I grew up in, but most people I knew had like depression and anxiety. I know I for sure did. So hearing people now that never had it and they don't understand why anybody would do something like that, it's hard to let them understand, like, even at the holidays when it should be the happiest, it should be, you should be just thankful to be around family and stuff like that. It's the hardest for people, some people, and that's why they end up doing that. But people like yourself, first responders who have to go in and find that, it's extremely hard on them too. And you're right. There's not enough training. And I don't even know if there could be enough training. You're going to see stuff that nobody ever wants to see. Yeah. And, somebody in a car accident is horrible, and you see somebody who's been deformed because of a car accident or something, and you come up on the accident, it's really bad. But when they do it by their own hand, that's what's really, really tough.
There's a big difference between force majeure, acts of nature and acts of God, but even accidents. But intentional issues are so difficult to get past. And I couldn't get past it. I remember the last call I ever took was in the middle of the night, and it was one of those situations. And I just took my headphones off, rolled my chair back away from my station, told my partner that I was working with that I'm done. And I was the supervisor at the time. And I just went in the corner and cried.
Yeah.
It was too much. It had overloaded me. So
was that your last?
That was my last shift, last call, last anything.
So it really was enough. You were done after that.
Yeah. I left that, and I made reservations. Party of one for about a month, and then put my big boy pants on and got a job at McDonald's of all places. Because I needed to work. It was an assistant managership in Tyler, Texas, and I really, really, really found out that I enjoyed the restaurant industry. Now, I'd worked in restaurants off and on from high school to college and that sort, Pizza Hut and stuff like that. Worked for a skating rink when I was in high school because that's what we did at that age. But when I got into the restaurant, I really enjoyed the minutia of it, the details of it, the checklists and the dealing with human resources and stuff like that. What I didn't like was, the food, the McDonald's food. You go home smelling like that. There's a difference between eating it and going home and smelling like it.
Yeah, I worked at a pizza restaurant in high school, and I love pizza, and I still love pizza. But you would go home and you would stink, and you would think that you would smell like pizza, but you don't. You smell like every single thing that was in that kitchen, and things that you're like, why does it smell like this? You got flour on you, and you've got cleaning, stuff on you and all that. And I can understand.
And the grease just saturates
it permeates everything that you wear. Yeah.
So I left that and ended up going with a company that I was somewhat familiar with, McAllister's Deli.
Oh,
It actually started as an offshoot of Bulldog Deli in Starkville, so I was familiar with that company. I'd grown up with it. And I worked for them as an assistant manager for 6 months and then got promoted to general manager in Longview, Texas. There, I took over kind of a failing store. Even though it had just opened up 6 months earlier, it was failing. So I was able to go in there, unfortunately, pink slip half the staff and rehire and retool and bring it back to life. And at the end, before I left there, we were doing $7 million a year in business in sandwiches. And it's unheard of.
yeah.
We were sponsoring golf tournaments. We were doing all kinds of stuff with the community. Um, I've got a great story that Tim McGraw and Faith Hill used to come in all the time. And she would get the muffalata. And one night when she's eating the muffalata, she bit into the sandwich and chipped her tooth. Well, unbeknownst to me, one of my employees had just gotten engaged a couple of weeks ago and had this little tiny diamond ring, and the diamond had fallen off into the olive salad. So, yeah, I chipped Faith Hill's tooth.
That's fantastic. I've never had to worry about that before.
She was extraordinarily gracious, though.
Yeah.
Both of them were. But, yeah, that's my big claim to fame on that one.
Well, there you go. It's funny how we're all connected through, like, what is it called? The 6 degrees of separation, or whatever. And you think about how many people you know and how you're connected to. So the guy had a couple episodes back, Dorsett Davis. He was a professional football player, and he played with Ed McCaffrey and Shannon Sharp and John Elway and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm sitting across the table from a guy who has rubbed shoulders with some of the greatest NFL players I've ever heard of, and now you're telling me about Faith Hill and Tim McGraw. And your personal account experience with them, it's just so neat how we're all connected like that. But
I've been blessed in my career. When I left there, I had decided that I was going to do a new evolution. Well, I was getting ready to go to Waco to open up a new store with them, and the economy just kind of slowed down. But I'd already trained my replacement, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not doing anything new. I'm not engaging anything new in my brain. I'm just filling a void right now, and my replacement was already trained, so I'm like, okay, what am I going to do next? What's my next evolution? So I went to culinary school. I looked at several of them. I looked at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, France. I don't speak French at all, well, except for some culinary terms now, but back then, nothing. Colorado Mountain College in Keystone, Colorado, which would have been a beautiful place to go, but it was a 4-year degree. I didn't need that. I already had a 4-year degree. And the other one was the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York. And it's considered the most prestigious, the premier culinary institute, the premier culinary school. It's equivalent to the Harvard in culinary industry. And I thought, no way I'm going to be able to get into that. I've heard stories about how hard it is to get into it. In Dallas, they were having a meet and greet, so I went to that one night, and it wasn't even 24 hours later that I'm getting a phone call from a recruiter asking me if I would be interested in the next class. So I said, well, when's the next class? In 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing next. And I wasn't able to do that class, so I had to delay it a little bit longer for 4 weeks. I get back, and I'm super excited about that. And I get home from work. This is after I told them that I'm leaving. I get home from work, and this was 10 o'clock at night, I guess, and I get a phone call from my mother saying my dad was in the hospital. And I'm in Longview, Texas, and they're in Starkville, Mississippi. It's a good 8-hour drive. And I just said, okay, all right, let me get some things together and I'll be on my way. And she says, you need to hurry. So I call my best friend. I tell him what's going on. He's like, I'll be right over. And he literally came over in 30 minutes. And within that time, we were on the road. Very rare that you find a friend that's willing to drive 8 hours with you in the middle of the night. And we get to Shreveport, Louisiana. My mother calls me and said he had passed away.
So didn't even make it home.
Didn't even make it home. Luckily, there was a nurse there that had the same physical attributes as I did. And my dad thought that was me. So it gave him some peace, I believe. So we sat there for a few minutes, pulled over on the side of the road. I cried for a bit, and Eric took over and said, "All right, let's keep going." And we just went and went home and spent the next week there. And
Now there was a nurse there, so was your dad sick?
my dad had been in pretty bad health for a while. He survived cancer, brain cancer, for 30-something years, I think. He had what they called then proton surgery. Now it would be, I don't know what the equivalent of laser surgery or whatever it is, but it was in the basal brain stem area. So he survived that. He was a lineman with the telephone company for years, and who knows if that had any effect on him. But he was a survivor, and but it had come at a price. It had come at a cost. I mean, he was not in great health.
Yeah.
So I unfortunately couldn't be there for him, but I was there for my mother and my sister and my family at the time.
So when you get back, at what point what role did this play in your next transition to going to school? Or
It was a little difficult because I really didn't want to leave my family, having them so far away.
right?
You know, that was tough. Didn't want to leave my safety net in Texas at the time. But it was an opportunity I couldn't avoid. I couldn't take it. I had to take it. It just was one of those things that was so glaring. You look at it and it's like, oh, well, this is what it is. And I blame Sheryl Crow for that. At the time, well, one of the popular songs was "A Change Will Do You Good."
Yeah.
And I had a Jeep Wrangler at the time, and I'm rolling to work one morning and got the top down, and it's beautiful. It was, I think it was maybe late June, early July, and that song comes on the radio, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that's what I got to do. And I did. And I got there. It was July 30th, I believe, when I got up there. And the very next day, I'm sitting in class. My birthday's August 2nd. I turned 30 years old at the Culinary Institute of America, just days after I got there. And it was incredible to be able to do that.
So how long is that schooling up there?
That's about 2 years.
Okay.
So you go to school for a year, then you take an internship, and then you finish up your second half. And in that, I mean, it's a very professional school. Everyone wears the jacket. Everyone wears the chef's toque, the white hat that,
Right.
you know, or you're in business attire. It's not like
Now, what did you call it? The chef's what?
the chef's toque, TOQUE, which is it's the
tall
hat,
white
the
hat?
tall white hat.
Okay.
Yeah, not the other toque.
Well, I don't know. I didn't. I was like, did he call it a tote? I didn't know, but
And there's legends and legends about how that evolved, and
Yeah.
there's every contradictory legend you can think of, from the Byzantine monks to the French Revolution.
now do they place you in an internship, or is that something that you have to find as
They
part
will
of your...
help you get an internship.
Where did you
But,
intern?
I ended up. I had looked at several locations. I was going to go to the Greenbrier in West Virginia, beautiful property. I was looking at the Peabody here in Memphis, actually, and actually interviewed with Chef Jose, who's also a brother from Bartlett Lodge.
Okay.
But I wasn't involved at the time. And then ended up in Hot Springs, Arkansas at the Arlington Resort with Franklin Dye. Franklin's still a good friend of mine today, Chef Franklin Dye.
I love Hot Springs.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, but it earns its name.
Yeah.
And if you're in the service industry, it doubly earns its name because the kitchen was hot.
Yeah, I can imagine. And the Arlington's the one right there, kind of near Bathhouse Row, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
We
it's
did
the
a
old Grand
tour.
Hotel there.
Yes, we did a tour, a gangster museum tour while we were there. And they talked about there's a lot of history there. One, but also it's just a cool town to go to. It's much bigger than you think it is. And there is a lot of stuff to do, outdoor stuff, and the bathhouses and history, and so that's pretty cool. So you spent your time there for an internship?
Yeah, and it was great.
Just a year?
Not even a year. I think
Okay.
it was maybe 6 months at most. I got to do seasonal stuff. So, I mean, I was there for the summer and I was there for the winter, but I didn't cross over too much into the rest of the seasons. So it was nice. I mean, it was a good time to be there. Before they tore down the old Majestic Hotel, I got a chance to do something in that, and then went over to the Arlington and worked for Franklin. And my favorite place in that hotel was a freezer that was solely dedicated to ice blocks for ice carving. And you open up the place, and it was just this blue-green sea of ice in there. And I just wanted to get up on top of it and be like, just igloo myself in there for a while.
Well, I'm glad you didn't do that. People probably drank out of that ice at some point. They probably used it for drinks or something. So you've done your internship there, and now you have to go back to New York to finish the school, right? So how are you flying back and forth? Are you driving back and forth?
I drove.
Okay.
Yeah. So that Jeep Wrangler I was telling you about,
Yeah.
it made several trips from Texas to New York, Arkansas to New York, Mississippi to New York, and back and forth. And I ended up one time.
Not the best road trip vehicle.
Oh,
either.
it's great. It was fantastic. I ended up one time taking the wrong turn somewhere in West Virginia. I'm not really sure where. But I ended up on the wrong side of the Appalachian Mountains.
Surprise.
So when I'm supposed to be on the east side of the mountains, I'm on the west side of the mountains, and I'm trying to find my way back, and I'm doing it old paper map style,
Right.
land navigation style. And what I failed to consider was elevation. And I'm seeing this, there's a roadway that cuts through. I'll just take that. 6 hours later, I'm still crossing over the Appalachian Mountains, but I'm really high in altitude at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm rolling through this little small community at about 1 o'clock at night on a Friday night. And I'm pulling a U-Haul trailer with my Jeep and the top's down on it, and I'm just blasting music to keep me awake. And all of a sudden I look out there, and there are kids hanging out in this little small town in Appalachia, and they're just watching me drive by. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't roll the windows up. How do I? But they were really friendly, really nice. They helped me get to where I needed to go. And they were like, now you need to go this way. It'll be a lot faster. And if you go down there, you'll really friendly, really able to get me back on track.
Could have been really, though, like a hills have eyes kind of moment. Like,
very much.
Go down here and turn down this road.
Luckily, I didn't hear any
where
banjos.
all our cousins are waiting. Hey, banjos, that happened actually in Ellijay, Georgia. Okay, that was a little bit different place. It gives us a bad name, but that's so funny that you would end up in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, knowing they probably not even heard music like what you're playing.
You would be surprised. They were listening to rap music, but it wasn't the normal kind of rap music. It was sort of this bluegrass rap fusion.
Oh, yeah.
Now we call it gangster grass.
I've never heard of that before.
Oh, you should check it out. It's
I'm
great.
going to have to now. Yeah. My grandparents were actually a bluegrass band, and my granddad was really well known for his style of playing banjo, and they were from Pennsylvania. So, it was so different and unique for somebody to be where he was from, to play like he did, and he had all these different, he played with some famous bluegrass musicians, and so I love bluegrass, and I'm also a big fan of rap, so that'll be right up my alley. So I'll be listening to that next. So you get back to New York.
So I get back to New York, and I'm finishing up my second year, and I get involved in campus politics, for lack of a better word. It wasn't really political, so to speak, but I get involved with the student body council. I ended up becoming student council president. I was the ambassador for the National Restaurant Association's Educational Foundation. I got to sit at a table in Chicago at the NRA show, National Restaurant Association show, and pick the brain of some of the biggest leaders in the industry. So it was a lot of great opportunity for that. I graduated cum laude. I, had a really good time with it. Really enjoyed it. Hated to leave. And I'd gotten offered for a position at the Greenbrier as cook 2, which is kind of starting at the bottom, but not completely at the bottom. And that's because I knew the executive chef. I had actually helped him out when he did his certified master chef test, which is a brutal meat grinder of a test. It's 8 days long and 16-hour days. It's just brutal.
Wow.
No, thank you. I'll hard pass on that one. I'm certified executive chef, which is a level down, but there's a big leap in knowledge base between the two. So I knew him, and he offered me a cook two position right out of culinary school. But me being the idiot that I wasn't thinking about the future at the time. So I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I went to work on a cruise ship because they offered me executive chef on the cruise ship, and this was one of those small intercoastal waterway vessels, 100 passenger vessels and stuff. And it was fun, but it was 16, 17, 18-hour days, and I was constantly falling asleep at the table while we were doing shift meeting at the end of the night. One night I actually fell asleep completely at the table, and the next thing I know, the stewards were waking me up at 6 in the morning with coffee. So at that point, I'm like, this is not really what I want to do. Then we hit the St. Lawrence Seaway and came out into Lake Erie. And if you're not familiar with the Great Lakes, there's nothing lake about them.
No.
They are oceans. They are mini oceans is all they are.
Yeah.
And we had 14-foot swells all the way to Windsor, Ontario in a flat bottom vessel. And it was brutal. And it was, at that point, I had never quit a job in anger. I'd never quit a job in disgust. But when I left that ship, I turned around and I gave it the two-fingered salute, one from each hand. And I was done at that point. So I spent a little time. I made my way around and ended up doing a couple stages here and there. Chicago, went to Tompalombombo or Frontera Grill with Rick Bayless, and did a few other locations, and ended up back in Mississippi visiting family, and I found a job there and started doing that. And then ended up, after that, Alaska, of all places.
Wow, you've really been around. I had no idea.
Alaska was a lot of fun. It was a fly-out fishing lodge. So in order to get to it, you had to go to Anchorage first and then take a float plane where they took off of this lake and barely missed the top of the building that they're man, it gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it.
And a float plane, for everybody that doesn't know, is literally a plane that can land and take off on the water.
Yeah.
It's just like a pontoon.
Exactly.
With, but a plane.
Exactly. So, and in the wintertime, they swap out the pontoons for skis.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
they'll able to get in and out. But there's a period of time where they really can't get in and out because of weather changing.
Right.
So we were there for the whole summer, and it was beautiful. It was sunshine 24 hours a day. There's a picture of all of us out there at 2 o'clock in the morning holding this sign up on the equinox, and we might have had a little to drink. But once the season was over, come October, it was 0 degrees, and it was cold, and it was time to get out of there. So we get out, and I guess we must have missed the squall line by 5 or 6 hours, because they said if we hadn't gotten out when we did, we would have been stuck there until the snow season, until it stopped snowing, essentially. So we would have had our own little personal The Shining moment probably out there.
That would have been good.
Yeah, that would have been great. We would have probably ended up being a lot thinner than we were.
So where do you go when you leave Alaska?
So from there, I ended up going back to Mississippi again. Ended up working for a restaurant company called Eat With Us.
Okay.
Eat With Us owns Harvey's, Sweet Peppers, and the Grills, all in northeast Mississippi area. And in the case of Sweet Peppers, even further than that, into the southeast region. Ended up working for them as a corporate chef. Really enjoyed that company. Really enjoyed working for them.
Well, what's the difference between executive chef and corporate chef and, say, sous chef or whatever,
So a sous chef is an under chef. They typically work underneath the auspices of a head chef or an executive chef. Where the terminology comes in, head chef would be someone in a restaurant, executive chef would be someone in a hotel. And a lot of it has to do with how many people you administer, how many people that work for you, and what kind of role you do inside that operation. I tend to find the higher the title, the less you spend with a knife and the more you spend with a clipboard.
Okay. So is a corporate chef that's similar to an executive chef? Or?
Corporate chef, you do a lot of product testing. You do a lot of research and development. You do a lot of training other staff members as well. So you go around to the various locations. Openings are a lot of fun. You get to train staff and you get to experience other locations with that.
Okay.
And then there was an opportunity that just kind of fell in my lap. It was here in Memphis. L'école Culinaire, which was in Cordova, decided they were looking for some instructors. I happened to know one of them there, and he called me. He says, "Hey, there's this great opportunity up here in Memphis. You should check it out." And I did, and I was with them for 9 years. Um, I was with them almost at the very beginning, and I was there on the very last day when they shut the gas off.
What made them close?
So L'Ecole Culinaire was part of Vatterott College. Vatterott College was a for-profit educational institution that, like a lot of for-profit educational institutions, had kind of gotten caught up in their own trap, overcharging and that sort of thing. We would have survived. L'Ecole Culinaire would have survived. We had the ability if the company had fractured us off and made us our own entity. But they didn't do that. We ended up going down with the ship when they failed.
Yeah.
And when they failed, unfortunately, they failed big time. And one day, I think it was December 18th, 2018, I was teaching my class, and I was in the international kitchen, and in the middle of my class, I came in, shut my gas off, and said, "That's it, we're done."
Just in the middle of class?
Middle of class.
You didn't even know it was coming.
Didn't even get to teach the day out, let alone that semester.
It's funny that that date and time is when it happened, because we had just moved to Memphis in August of 2018, and December 18th is an important day for me. Just my best friend back home, it's his birthday, so I know that. But then my dog was born on his birthday. It's so random that I would know that. But while I'm celebrating this new dog that I'm getting to help me get over the dog that had died that caused me to move here, and you're going to work like a normal day that day, and in the middle of the day, they're just like, "That's it, you're done." 7 days before Christmas.
Yeah. That was brutal. That was tough.
Yeah.
That was a hard nut to swallow.
You didn't even have a chance to possibly, was it on your radar that it's possible they might close? Like, had you put some feelers out, like maybe I'll go work here next, or maybe I'll do this next?
In retrospect, it should have been.
Yeah.
Because they were following a unsustainable model.
Mm-hmm.
We should have had red flags, but we weren't looking at them.
So at the time, you're, just kind of living normal life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, it's important to say, years ago, people would go to work somewhere and they would stay for 30 years and then they would retire from that. To me, and what you do, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, culinary is a trade. It's, because you could have done it even without all the schooling, probably would have been a lot harder, wouldn't have had the connections that you had. But it's a trade, and because not everybody can just do it. Yeah. I will be the first to admit that I hate cooking, not a fan of it. And somebody asked me the other night too, they said, "Why you hate cooking? Like, why?" And I'm like, I don't know. It's tedious. It's, I don't know what ingredients are supposed to taste like this and taste like that. Matter of fact, we were talking about you because I said, there's some people who can just put food together. Like, I could probably follow instructions and make it work. Mm-hmm. Okay. I know I can do that. I've done that. But we had a chili cook-off that you were a part of, and you're naming off the things you put in there. And the way you're naming them off was so, like, almost as if everybody's heard of this stuff, because that's what you do and that's your world. But, when you were saying, I could be wrong. I'm sure I tell the story wrong, but it sounded like you were talking about some kind of jelly that only comes from like West Africa or something. It was like, yeah, I tell people, I'm like, he was naming off ingredients that I'd never heard of before. And he was like, "Oh yeah, just a pinch of this South African orange jelly that only comes from a tree up." It's like, and I love that about you because you love what you do. Yep. And as a trade, so to bring this all back together, as a trade, you could have gone anywhere. So as unfortunate as it was that the school was going to close, or the school did close like that, you were going to be fine.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was very fortuitous because within days of us closing down, Tim Floor actually reached out to me. And he couldn't make any official engagement because he wasn't speaking on behalf of the University of Memphis. But he was looking for someone to talk to about that space because the university was interested in it.
Like the physical space.
The physical space that we were in. And it's a huge facility. It's 33,000 square feet of kitchen space and educational space. So, I mean, it's a ready-made department, essentially. And when Tim reached out to me about it, next thing you know, we're talking about logistics, we're talking about programming, we're talking about what classes need to be put together, and and it just snowballed into this opportunity. I started working with them unofficially of getting it started. In the meantime, I'm doing private catering to make the bills pay and all that, and uh, eventually, once we got it off the ground in July of that next year, 2019, I started working with the university officially as an instructor.
So
And
7 months though, you had to
yeah,
hustle
oh yeah,
and make it work so
oh
that the
yeah,
bills were paid and, food's on the table, roof over the
hmm
head. Now you're not married.
no, unfortunately not.
Okay. And so, so unfortunately not, but fortunate for you because that's the kind of stuff right there that really will test
hmm
your sense of being, your sense of worth. It just is when you are the one who everything is on your shoulders, and for you, I think you'll figure out a way. When it's
hmm
just you, you figure out a way. But when you've got people that are literally like have to depend on everything that you're doing, boy, that's a tough spot to
yeah,
be in. So fortunately at the time you were able to not have to worry about everybody and just yourself. But
hmm
7 months is a long time to be hustling with no steady guarantee of where your next check is going to come from and not
hmm
know what the future might hold and all that stuff. So
And I enjoyed the gig economy from that. I learned
yeah,
about the gig economy and how that works. And it's no way to make a living, but it is a way to survive if you had
yeah,
to.
for sure.
But I ended up coming on board with the university and have enjoyed that thoroughly. I took over as program director for Kemmons Wilson Culinary School, Kemmons Wilson Culinary Institute, about 2 years ago, and I've been working with them ever since doing that. So now, technically, I've been in that same building for 15 years. I'm like the ghost in the machine. I'm just wandering the hallways, going, "Anyone want to learn to cook?" So, um,
Now, as far as your life goes in general, I mean, we know each other through masonry. That's how I first met you. At what point did you join masonry during this?
so that's interesting. I didn't get involved with masonry until I moved up here in Memphis. And one of the reasons why, and if you know anything about the culinary industry, chefs are also notorious for being the captains of their own personal pirate ships.
Right.
The individuals that work in the culinary industry are a little salty sometimes. We have our own language. A lot of them involve
Colorful language.
colorful language. We'll just leave it at that. Jokes about your mothers and
Yeah.
things like that. Anatomy and
That's a trade thing.
oh yeah,
That's
very much,
totally a trade thing.
very
As
much.
truck drivers, we were the same way.
That's how we bond.
That's
It's
how we
just
bond.
absolutely it is.
Especially men who
Mhm.
give each other a hard time and
No, the women were brutal, more
well,
brutal
women,
than we.
yeah, I'm sure the women
In
were
my
brutal.
industry, the women were more brutal than the men were. I mean, they gave it as much as they got it, and harder sometimes
Oh
in many
no.
cases. Um, but I was looking for something. I was looking for the company of people that I didn't have that expectation of.
Yeah.
And I initially had reached out to several lodges in the Memphis area, not knowing much about masonry at the time. Never really heard anything back from anyone. But I had just moved to Midtown and I had driven by this building a dozen times. Not really sure what it was, but I noticed that it had Park Avenue Masonic Temple at the top. It's a big, beautiful building. It looked like it was an abandoned building, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
And one day I noticed that the side door was open and someone was standing outside of it. So I just stopped and checked to see what it was about. And next thing you know, I'm being pulled inside. And I'm still in my chef's uniform from work. And Bob McNeese, he latched onto me just immediately. And anyone who knows Bob McNeese knows exactly the kind of person I'm talking about. He was just a good, kind soul. And they brought me in there like, "Hey, let's talk. Let's talk. What do you want to do? Let me show you this. Let me show you that." And I just felt so welcomed,
Right.
so at home there. And that really started my Masonic career right there.
So let me back it up a little bit. You have had you've been around, in the food space, right? You've done not only the cooking, but the clipboarding, the instructing. You've been from New York to Alaska to Texas to all over in these spaces. All that life and that traveling, that actual traveling, and you'd never joined or never thought about doing Freemasonry then, what was it? I mean, obviously you wanted some, some kind of friendship or things, outside of just the kitchen, because obviously it's a separate kind of bond, a special bond, because our work families do become like family, and we spend so much time with the people we work with.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy to kind of treat them like family, and it doesn't always happen. They don't always feel the same way. But why? I mean, what made you think of Freemasonry? Like, how did you even hear about Freemasonry to even know that it was a possibility for you?
Growing up, I knew some Masons growing up. I didn't know there were Masons at the time. I knew them more as Shriners, but I didn't equate the two.
Yeah.
So
Well, and a lot of people don't know
no.
that Shriners are Masons, that they all start in what we call the Blue Lodge. The Blue Lodge, I explain to people, is the trunk of the tree. And then as you go up, the branches are the appendant bodies, the Shriners being one of the branches. But the Shriners is probably the most well-known branch of Masonry, I think, from somebody who spent many years on the outside looking in. I never heard of a, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Masonic Hospital,
Right.
but there was Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Scottish Rite Hospital, and there was a Shriners Hospital, and I've seen the Shriners and remember them being out there for parades, and I do not remember seeing, Blue Lodge, Masons just out and about during parades and stuff like that. Not where I'm from. And if they were, I definitely didn't notice it. I didn't understand what it was, but you can always tell the Shriners because of the fezzes. I mean, they're just unmistakable. So you knew about it basically growing up, and then what made you decide at that time, like, I guess I am going to give this a shot, especially with so much disinformation. So, because if we're talking about you've been in that same building for 15 years now, right? So 15 years ago, we're in the early 2000s. So there's plenty of internet, disinformation, information. Like, had you done any research?
A little bit. I didn't do too much on purpose because I wanted to have that experience.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that people forget about, that the experience is part of it. Being the initiation part is so important,
Yes.
especially to men. The initiation part is so important because we don't really come into our own without some sort of initiation.
Right.
Whereas, as you're growing up, whether it's in sports or whether it's in military or whether it's in any other kind of college or whatever it is, we don't really come into ourselves and what we know about ourselves except through initiation. But for me, I was driving down the road and I saw the Scottish Rite Temple, and I thought, that's a cool building. I wonder what goes in there.
You saw the one here in Memphis?
I did.
Yeah.
I stopped in and I met a man named Gerald Leake, and he was just so interesting. And from there, I ended up seeking out a lodge here in Memphis, and Gerald knows exactly who I'm talking about. When you talk about Gerald, everybody knows him in this area.
Yeah.
So I sought out a lodge in the area, and I first reached out to a couple of lodges. I won't mention their names, but I reached out to a couple of different lodges in the area and just never heard anything back from them. And that's common, unfortunately. You know, even our lodge, sometimes we get lost in the shuffle and can't respond back to everybody really quickly. But I just happened to be driving by the lodge one day and saw it open.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, this is a cool thing. So at that point, I asked for a petition.
Yeah.
Not everybody understands that in order to join, we can't ask you to join. You
Right.
have to be the one that asks. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions about Freemasonry is, oh, well, my dad never asked me to join, or, of course he didn't. He couldn't. He was waiting on you to ask, because it's always of your own free will and accord. And I did. I asked, and in October of 2010, I was initiated as an entered apprentice, and then immediately had to go to Italy for 2 weeks to take some students over there. It was terrible. Oh, such a horrible
Yeah.
thing.
I can only imagine.
Had
So
to go
rough.
to Italy. It's so bad.
So rough.
And then I ended up meeting one of my students that I took over there. He was also a master mason.
Okay.
And I told him that I had just been initiated and entered apprentice. He was a Prince Hall Mason. And I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
I'm so young in the fraternity, I didn't know anything about it. So we started talking, and he's like, okay, well, this is what you need to do. You need to talk to your mentor. You need to get them to sit down with you and do this. And he was very helpful for me. We talked about masonry without talking masonry at the time. And when I got back, one of my brothers, Larry Como, he sat down with me and he started working with my lecture. And next thing you know, I'm getting my fellow crafts degree in February, and in March, I'm getting my third degree. And it was just from there a whirlwind.
And you were raised at Park Avenue.
Yes.
Right. And did all that.
Yeah.
And so for people that are listening that don't understand masonry or don't know anything about masonry, like you had said, like, oh, my dad was a Mason and he never asked me to join. Or my grandfather was a Mason and he never asked me to join. And he never talked about it. My dad never talked about it. And, that is essentially, I think you listen to the podcast I did with Buddy. And so him and I talked about it a little bit then too, but there was a lot of these older Masons grew up in a time where they didn't talk about masonry, not just because we don't recruit people. We're never going to ask anybody to join, or we should never ask anybody to join. But also they didn't know what they could and could not talk about. And and so what do you do when you don't know what you can say? You say nothing.
Yeah.
And
we've done a terrible disservice to the fraternity because of this. You look back in the records of the fraternity in the 1920s, our meeting days were published in the local newspaper. People knew what was going on at the lodge and what was happening. There were big dances and events and dinners and all this stuff, and it was published in the newspaper that we were having this.
And like what you said, when you drove by a building that you thought was abandoned, but there's so much life inside that building at certain times that you now, knowing what you know now, it's like, oh, there's always stuff going on at this lodge for the most part. If you got degrees going, you got your stated, you got other bodies that use the lodge. It's busier than you think. You just don't realize it. And a lot of places do look abandoned.
Yeah.
And so it is, how do you know when to go in? And some place you may go to, and they may not have a sign on the door that says stated meeting first Thursday, 6 o'clock for a meal, 7 o'clock for the meeting, and so it's hard. It's harder now than it was before, especially in an era of immediate information. We have cell phones and everything that we could possibly use to get information out, yet we don't talk about, stuff like that. And so if somebody goes by a building, doesn't know anything about it, how do you know what it is, or how do you know when you can go there, and so on and so forth? So,
well, that's why we made a conscious effort to open our building up. And, we have Idlewild community that meets there once a month. We have the college fraternities do their initiations there as well. So we want to engage with the public. We want that, and we want to get back to being the center of the community. We're doing a blood drive coming up, and that's going to be something we've done the last couple of years out of the blood mobile, but this time they're going to be inside, so it'll be a little more comfortable for people. So getting people to realize we're there for one thing, and then on the other side of that, to get them to know that it's not an abandoned building. We have been thriving. We are growing in our membership. Now, certainly we've lost a lot of members. At one point, we were 3,000 members.
At your lodge?
At our lodge. In the 1970s, I believe it was, we had reached the apex of about 3,000 members. And a lot of that was the World War II generation that had come back. And we've had a lot of famous members there. We've had Kemmons Wilson Sr. Was a member there for 60 years. He was also a Shriner for 60 years. We just don't do a good job of telling our story. So, we've, just like Carterville Lodge has done, you've done a lot of, and Unity Lodge have done a lot of retrofitting on the outside to make it to where people see it and they realize it's a viable entity there. We've done that as well through marketing, through social media. We went through this whole campaign of creating a logo. We've got coins, we've got cards, we've got stickers, we've got all these things just to be able to have a presence. And that's not soliciting. That's advertising. That's marketing. That's completely different.
Which I was about to say. So I feel the same way you do. And I am, you know, of the firm belief that I don't have, I'm not going to recruit people to join
Right.
because I, one, know that I'm not allowed to. But two, there's nothing that says that I can't tell you what Freemasonry has done to me,
Absolutely.
what it's done for me, the relationships that I've made, the brothers that I've found. Is every lodge perfect? No. Is every brother perfect? Absolutely not. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
But we also know that we're there to become better men. You know, it is the world's oldest fraternity, and we do things a certain way. So, yes, there are some things that are, you know, you kind of like, oh, it'd be probably better if we did it this way. But that's not how we do it. That's not the rituals that we do. And so we keep it that way. And that's okay. But in this day and age, there's nothing that says I can't tell you how great it has been for me
Mm-hmm.
and what I, you know, what I get out of it when we, you know, make food for the needy, and you know, I'm able to gather with those brothers that share a similar interest and do stuff like that and put that together. Or when we have these community pancake breakfasts and, you know, raise funds for other things that we do, like the scholarships that we give out to high school students, you know, and those are the things that, yes, we don't necessarily put those out there. They're not in the newspaper for the most part. You know, you're not going to see them as a sponsored social media ad a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
but they are things that we do, and they're things that we want the community to know. Like if nothing else, we are there for our community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are an essential part of the community, and not only that, but so many men are Masons that a lot of people don't realize, and that's okay. But they play an integral role in their community,
Yeah, absolutely.
like Tommy and John over in
Mm-hmm.
Collierville. You know, these businessmen are, you know, very heavy into real estate there and have brought businesses and helped other businesses flourish, and they give back to their community and they do all these things. And are they good men? Yes. Were they probably going to be good men without fraternity? Yes. But did they become better men because of the fraternity? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we instill in each other. So, you know, kudos to you guys, especially what you're doing at Park, because I noticed the difference. I noticed the videos, the logo that you were talking
Mm-hmm.
about, you know, being present when you guys post the history of the lodge. And I learned a lot of stuff about Andrew Jackson from your Instagram page and, you know, stuff like that. So it does make a difference. And you know, Richard Minton, past master at Carterville Lodge, I'm sure he's taken a page out of that too, because he's done stuff like making the pins and, you
Mm-hmm.
know, trying to make sure we celebrate our 175th anniversary when he was a master. And, you know, he's made a very conscious effort to make sure that we are well known, and like, you know, doing things like the outside remodel and stuff like that is great.
Yeah.
You know, we want to have a nice building that we can leave on to the next man, and but also it's good for the community
Mm-hmm.
to,
You
you
know,
know.
it's funny you mentioned Andrew Jackson. I was watching a documentary about him this morning, and he was not a perfect man. He was a flawed man in many respects, but he was a man of his own time. So you know, he gets a lot of malevolence because of the whole Trail of Tears situation, and but that was the prevailing winds in politics during that time, and that's what people forget. But you know, he fostered in a completely new style of democracy in this country.
Hmm.
Before that, it was, you know, it wasn't even the people that voted. It was and it was the representatives that voted for representatives. So I mean, you know, the people didn't really have a say. So you go back to this idea that the United States is a Masonic invention. Well, it wasn't a Masonic invention, but it was influenced heavily by Masonry because of the idea of the egalitarian part of the nature of our order, of our fraternity. It's you know, liberty, egalitarianism, fraternity, and how this folds into the working of the United States today. And I feel it's slipping away from us in this case. And maybe it's time for another Freemason to become president. I don't know if
I
that'll ever
mean,
happen, but
golly, it's
once we figure out the pancake breakfast, maybe.
I know
It's,
that's another thing too, is people talk about that all the time and make jokes about it. And so my lodge just had a pancake breakfast, and we bring any first responder that shows up in uniform, they eat for free. it's a fundraiser that we do. So, but we try to make sure we're giving back to the community in some way. We take the money in, we push it right back out. But when first responders are there, we try to make sure they get for free. And a guy, one of the police officers came in and started talking to me. One, he didn't know our building was even there. He's been with the police officer or police department for, I think he said 2 years.
That's a little scary.
Right. So he knew he's in the area, but didn't know that that's what our building was. You know what I mean? It's not like there's a giant banner outside that says Masons meet here, but, and then the other guys that were there with him, same thing. One was there for a year. The other one had just gotten there for 2 years. And they also didn't know that that was a Masonic lodge there. So it's having conversations with him and talking about, like, these are the things that you don't know about, and here's where we are, and this is what we stand for, and this is why it's important. And, so changing times, Thomas Jefferson, not Tom, Andrew Jackson making changes in his times, and now it's our opportunity to make changes in our times. But the problem is we're so mixed up in we're the Illuminati, and we've got this, we plan this and we plan that. And I know I kind of trailed off a little bit there, but I'm saying, like, all that to say, we have a hard time scheduling a pancake breakfast.
Yes.
Our local police officers don't even realize that our lodge is there. They know where the building's at, but they didn't know that that's what it was. So I assure you, there's nothing about us that is trying to do political takeover or anything like that, but we fully believe in good, wholesome values that, we hope that one of our brothers would take into a large office like that one day and maybe help change the country back to where it should be. But I do see the documentaries that are like, Washington was designed with this point, and this is how this and that.
Of course they were. If you know anything about city planning, that's exactly how they're laid out.
Yeah, it's like, it was just a good layout plan. And a lot of times you can point to things and say, that looks very similar, very similar.
But then why wouldn't Washington, the city, have been laid out like that? Because it was designed by Masons.
Yeah.
And, we like to put our mark on things. As a Royal Arch Mason.
Right.
Clearly. As a Royal Arch Mason, one of the degrees is the Mark Master degree. And it teaches us about supplying our mark, the mark of a Master Mason. And that mark is individual to each one of us. So we all have our own identifying logo. And it's based off of the old stonemasons who would create a mark on their work to identify it. It's their signature.
Yeah.
And
I was about to say, like, a signature for people that may not understand what the mark is. Yeah. It's like a signature.
So if you pull a wall panel off the wall at Park Avenue Lodge, chances are you're going to find somebody's signature behind it, because we were proud of the work that we did. We did a lot of the work ourselves. Some of it you can tell we did ourselves. But it's that engagement. And that was really one of the most fun times I think I'd ever had at the lodge, was doing that sort of hands-on work. With some of the brothers. We'd assemble on Sundays for a year, and we'd worked on the dining room, and we laughed and we had fun, and we got things accomplished. And for me, Freemasonry has done an incredible job in my life. To see me now and to see me 15 years ago, I was a different person then.
Which is funny, because when I think about you, Bill, I think of somebody who's very well put together, who, is always on top of stuff. You were the current secretary or your lodge, right?
And the York Rite.
And the York Rite.
Night Masons.
Which takes a lot.
Yes,
There's
does.
a lot to do that stuff. I have, in my eyes, I know you're a fantastic brother, and I know you do a lot of stuff. And I'm sure you're a fantastic secretary in your lodge. But in my mind, I have one of the best, if not the best, secretaries in the state of Tennessee in my lodge, and Mitch is just all-encompassing all the time, knows the answers to things, knows the work, knows what we can and can't do, is always willing to step up and do something, is never just going to let it go slip through the cracks, And if he doesn't know it or know somebody, he knows a guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's funny, because I know you're both the same way, because you're also somebody who is, the work, the rules, what needs to be done to get us where we're at, and you're not afraid to put in the effort, to put in the work to make it happen. I think secretaries are a very special breed. And I think in Masonry, that, there's different seats in the lodge that you go through, or if you choose, and the head of the lodge is the worshipful master. And, in your mind, before you're to that point, you want to say, oh, I'm in charge. I've made it to the top, whatever. But everyone inside the Blue Lodge knows that it is the secretary that keeps that lodge moving.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, but I would add a caveat, because a lot of people say, well, it's the secretary who's really in charge. That's not true. The master is in charge.
Yes.
The secretary's job is to supply them the information they need to make the choices, the correct choices for the good of the lodge, or to keep them informed, or to keep them on target and keep them moving. So without that good secretary in the lodge or in any of the other bodies, then the heads of the bodies can't be functional, can't be as efficient as they need to be.
You got to have that. It's like a gun without a magazine.
And I don't care what size lodge it is. If it's 50 members or if it's 500 members, you've got to have that. I will say that one thing I've realized after the previous secretary, we had a couple of interim secretaries in there, but the previous secretary, Chip Pasley, who was one of my mentors, he actually passed away in the lodge upstairs. Before you went in the lodge, you go up the stairs, and at the landing, he had actually passed away. And I found
heart attack?
Had a massive heart attack and was dead before he even hit the ground. But I found him the next day. He went out of this world to where he wanted to. He wanted to be at that lodge more than anything else. So I know that that he was okay with that. But he had been grooming me. I know he had been grooming me to take his position after he had passed away, or after he had left that position. Whether it was after I had been master of the lodge, he was going to work me into it. But one thing I learned really, really quickly: make sure you have a backup.
Right.
Know where everything is, because it took us a year to find all the finances and organization and get everything squared away. It was a brutal year after that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even if you've been a secretary for 10 years, start training somebody. Get a backup. Get a second. It doesn't hurt to have another helper in the lodge to help you out with stuff.
And I think that too is, it's not correlated the same, but it reminds me of similar. But have you seen this? The Master Builder or Master Planner program. Have you seen that just rolled out? Or they're trying to roll it out now, but that is a good idea to have something like that for secretaries, and maybe even call it the Master Secretary, because it's, you do need a contingency. This is where you find this.
Yeah.
This is where you find that. I'll be honest with you. If something happened to Mitch, it would be very worrisome. He just handles so much, and he does so much. I mean, a guy who just, shows up first thing for the pancake breakfast, and we're there at 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m. to start cooking stuff and get stuff prepared. And there are other brothers in the lodge that do that stuff, but Mitch, you just see him show up first thing. And when he's getting ready to start cooking or whatever it is, and then when you get ready to leave because you're just beat and tired and, whatever, and you look over and he's in the kitchen washing the dishes, and he's fully devoted to it. And this isn't a man who's doesn't have things going on outside of the lodge. He's busy outside the lodge too, but he has invested that time because he loves the fraternity and he loves the time with the brothers. And, it's just, you guys have a tough job.
Yeah, it's a difficult job. And, when Chip passed away, he was doing all of that. He was doing
the treasury
cooking,
work and
the
all
treasury,
that stuff too.
all of that. And that didn't do anyone any service at all. I mean, we had to delegate that out to the correct officers. But it's a terrible situation we're finding ourselves in, where it's 10% of the membership that does 100% of the work.
Yeah. Show up. And now I get it. The stated meeting is a business meeting. Right. Nobody likes the business meetings. It's, we're going to read the minutes and blah, 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 blah.
So you have to have something to engage the brothers in.
Yeah.
But you have to have other activities. Brother Dontrell at our lodge is now getting us to where we're starting to go out and do social events and
He'll be
gather
on soon,
together.
by the way.
Yes,
We
love
were
Dontrell.
talking about, we talked yesterday about you coming on. He was like, Brother Bill's going to be on there. Man, he's solid. I said, I know. Why do you think he's coming on?
Dontrell and I, we had a long history of trying to get him in
Yeah.
because of his situation, which he'll talk about.
Yeah. And I'll give a little teaser for that because Dontrell knows, and hopefully now that cements for sure that he's coming in because we've already talked about it. But Dontrell was a Prince Hall Mason who decided to demit from Prince Hall to join the Grand Lodge of Tennessee, which Dontrell is the person that taught me how to correctly say, because when I first started in Freemasonry, I'd heard of Prince Hall, but I didn't know that it wasn't the same as, like Grand Lodge of Tennessee or Grand Lodge of Mississippi or whatever.
Right.
And so I was like, well, Dontrell, what do I call it? Like, do I say we're the regular, Masons or what is, what's the difference? How do I say it? He was like, well, the correct way to say it would be you're part of the Grand Lodge of Tennessee and they're part of Prince Hall Grand Lodge. And so that would be the difference, but he's got a story of just a totally different perspective and so on and so forth. And there's a lot to unfold between the two. And I think they both have their own, special attributes and so on and so forth. But
Well,
yeah.
every lodge has a unique personality.
Oh, yeah.
And when you search for a lodge, you should visit multiple lodges
Yes.
and visit with those brothers because not every lodge is going to be your perfect fit. It's not going to be the glove that you put on that fits you perfectly. So you have to find something that's going to be more in keeping with your personality, what you're looking to get out of it, and that sort of thing.
And two, you got to keep in mind that, like you had said, when you guys spent a bunch of time together doing stuff at the lodge, right? That time is so special because when it's done, now you don't see each other as much. It's easier to kind of drift away from the lodge. If you don't have degrees going, you don't see those brothers that often, and you'll notice that you may have 35, 40 people show up on a degree night, and then on a stated meeting, you got 25 people. And it is a big difference, and you have to learn how to take those times, because it's ever changing. So when you can visit a bunch of lodges, and they may be having a fantastic year, and then the next year they got nothing. And Bartlett was a big one. Remember when Bartlett was just running through degrees? They were having new members all the time, and then they went almost 2 years without doing a master's degree, and that's a big deal for a very popular lodge. So, and Collierville's kind of fallen into that step right now where we had a ton of degrees 2 years in a row. And we've not, I don't even know if we've done a degree this year. We might have done one actually so far, and we're coming up in April, and that's, just kind of insane. But that's part of Masonry. Where we're not
feast or famine sometimes.
Yeah, it's just how it is. So,
and I blame this time of the year too. There's certain times of the year it's really tough for us to do anything, even if we have candidates in the pipeline. March because of Grand Lodge,
right.
And then December because of all the plethora of installation of officers we go through.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish we'd just walk in there and go, all right, you're installed.
Yeah.
Now let's get to work.
Yeah.
So I think, but Bartlett is known for their members that have gone through Grand Ascension line, gone through the Grand Line. And I love my brothers at Bartlett. That was one of my first connections that I got into once I became a Master Mason. I really enjoyed traveling around.
Me too.
That was one of the very first lodges that I traveled around to, and had some really good connections there. Some of the best men that I still engage with on a daily basis. Brother Ken DeLay, who
I was
calls
about to
me
say, shout out Ken DeLay.
Yeah, he called me at 9:00 at night, and he's like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry to wake you up." I'm like, "Ken, I'm not asleep. I'm not that old yet. I mean, come on, it's." But and he's just calling to talk, just calling to see what's going on. So, I love that about the fraternity, that you're going to meet every character, every personality. I love going to little tiny country lodges in the middle of nowhere, and I like going to big city lodges. And I got an opportunity to visit a lodge in Florence, Italy, which was incredible. It was actually upstairs in a museum, a Masonic museum, and the lodge was no bigger than this room we're in right now, which is you can't really get a frame of reference from this, but this room is probably what 13 by 13 or so.
Yeah,
And,
probably.
and it wasn't any bigger than that, but it was at the top of this stairwell that you had to get in, and this stairwell was kind of like it carved into the side of a rock, and I'm squeezing, going this way, sucking in, thinking thin, and the whole thing. And I get up there, and it was just jam packed with chairs, and there was one little tiny path around the altar that you can circumambulate
yeah.
around. And I said, how many people do you normally get up here for a meeting? He said, about 13, 14 at a time. And well, how many bodies meet here? Oh, 8 or 9 bodies meet here. I'm like,
I can't imagine
incredible.
putting 13 or 14 people in this room.
No,
Let
it was
alone.
just like, but it was a fantastic experience to go to another country and experience Freemasonry in that other country. And I'm a big believer that no matter where you go, you can find someone there. You'll find someone there to support you and to give you that. I'm not talking about financial support, although that is sometimes what occurs.
Yeah.
But that ability to lift you up,
Right.
to be able to walk into an environment where you know nobody, and then all of a sudden you not only have friends, you have brothers there.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that way as well. It's same thing that you said. The traveling aspect is I love it. I love going and visiting other lodges and meeting new brothers and building those connections and seeing people and just, experiencing something a little different, even if it's a different state, because there's a lot of people that don't realize like Freemasonry is not unilaterally the same across the, state to state or across the world. The Grand Lodge of England does things a different way than the Grand Lodge of Tennessee does. And the Grand Lodge of Mississippi does things differently than the Grand Lodge of Tennessee and Arkansas and Georgia and all that. And so when you've gotten a chance to see those degrees, for brothers that don't travel too, you're really missing out on a wonderful opportunity to meet some new brothers. Now, with that being said, there are some times you go to a lodge and you do not feel as welcome, or not that you're not welcomed, but it doesn't feel the same as when you walk into a lodge, especially a local lodge that some of the brothers, right?
Well, I've actually been asked to leave a lodge once.
Really?
Well, actually twice. Once was because I was with someone else and they were asked to leave, so I felt obligated to leave with them. And the other time was when I went to a lodge here in Memphis, and I was asked to leave. And this stemmed off of a situation that occurred within my lodge, some brothers in my lodge. And I understand why they did. I didn't agree with it at the time. I was actually representing the Grand Lodge at the time, and I was asked to leave because someone felt uncomfortable with a representative of my lodge being there. And I just graciously extracted myself, and I didn't cause any kerfuffle or kick up or anything like that. I just left, and that was for the good harmony and peace of the fraternity.
Yeah.
So, I mean, was it a kick in the teeth? Sure.
Yeah.
Did I feel terrible about it? Sure, absolutely I did. But for the sake of harmony,
Yeah.
I left. Now, since then, that brother and I we've talked, and I understand his standpoint, and he understood mine, and we're fine. There's no animosity about that whatsoever. But at the time, I was just like,
Yeah. A lot of things you can learn from the lodge because, I wasn't planning on going like so Masonic with it. I'm very interested about you and how you operate things, but I also know you're very knowledgeable. And so I feel good having a conversation with you about stuff like this. But, things that you learn because of things that we do in lodge, like we don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion. We are not a religion. You do have to have a belief in a higher power.
we use some aspects of religious teachings to convey moral lessons, and that's where people get confused, because yes, we do have the Bible or the Holy Book on our altar, but that's there to bind you to your obligations.
Right.
We take teachings from that to teach morality. We teach by allegory. So what people don't understand is that when Freemasonry was developed, the ability to read was not commonly shared.
Right.
Now, there were some very highly educated people that were in a fraternity that could read and were scholars, and then as time evolved, there were some members that were not necessarily scholars who didn't have the ability to read at that high level. So we teach by allegory, by play, and what we teach is morality and how to engage with each other.
So is that why you would say that there's so many symbols in Freemasonry?
Yeah.
Because so many people couldn't read?
Yeah, absolutely. If you walk into a Masonic lodge, almost everything in there is allegorical. From the colors on the walls to the tiles on the floor and the way things are laid out, and it's just like you're bombarded. It's almost like you're bombarded by symbology as you walk in the lodge.
Yes.
But it's so much more than that, because you have one level of meaning, then you have a deeper level, and then you may have a personal level.
Right.
So you have the external level, you have the esoteric level, and then you have the internal level of the meaning of what that could be. So there's lots of folds within that, and everyone takes a little something different out of Freemasonry. Whether it's now the new generation of people that are coming through, the men that are coming through now, a lot of them has expressed an interest in esotericism. They want to know what this means and the hidden meanings of that. And there are bodies within Freemasonry that freely discuss that. The Rosicrucians is a body as well within Freemasonry, which I'm a member of. And it's in order to advance, you have to write a paper and present it. So, I mean, it's almost educational. It's almost academic in its nature. And then there's bodies that delve more into I won't say religious aspects of it, but the spiritual aspects of it. Like, for instance, the York Rite. In the York Rite, it culminates in one of the only degrees within Freemasonry that requires you to be or sent to be a Christian, and that's the Knights Templar degree. So that is, for me, that's one of the most personal, as a Christian Freemason, that's one of the most personal degrees that I've ever experienced, and one of the most beautiful degrees I've ever experienced. And that's why today it holds a very special place for me.
Right.
But not every brother, is looking for that.
Right.
Scottish Rite is the College of Freemasonry. Everyone's going to get something different out of that. I'm a member of all of those, and I enjoy them for different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. You're everywhere I go. You were there. It's so funny because
I'm omniscient. I'm everywhere.
Now, let me ask you this. So you're not married, and we talked about that. Now, do you feel like that
It's not for lack of trying, though.
Well, and that's what I was going to go to next, right? So a lot of people don't know is the time it takes. I'm married, and I've got two small children. I've got a toddler and a newborn, and not only did I have kids late in life, but I also joined Masonry late in life. So, first starting out, it wasn't so bad to go to my Blue Lodge meetings and go to my Scottish Rite meetings and, be interested in joining other appendant bodies and stuff like that. But as my boys have gotten older and as the addition has come in, it does make it harder. And so, one of the things we talk about when you join is that we love to see you here. Absolutely love to see you here. But your family comes first. Your personal life really should be, trumping anything you do here. But keep what you learn here and use it in your personal life.
And I think that's why so many men are not able to come back as often as they would like to. I hear it all the time. I'd really love to get back in the lodge and really love to get back more active, but my family is this, and I've got this issue, and I've got that, and that's fully understandable, 100% understandable.
Yeah, I've got a brother I talk to, and every time I see him, which is, I usually run into him when it comes to like work stuff. He's an HVAC guy, and I knew him before before I was a Mason, and when I first started to join Masonry and started to talk to him more and knew that not everybody talked about Masonry. And I actually thought he was a Mason because of just the way he treated me and the way he would, if something happened with my business, HVAC, he would just immediately come by and say, well, at least let me come take a look at it. and see what it might be. It might be something little. And then he would fix it. And I'd say, okay, well, what do I owe you? You know, and he would say, well, don't worry about it right now. Just let me come back in and hang out, you know, because I owned an axe throwing business. And he would say, just let me come back in. And he never came in to actually throw axes, but he was busy a lot. He's a small town, small business owner, and he is all the time busy. But one day I went to a lodge and he was sitting in there. And I said, oh, man, I always thought you were. And we have talked several times. And he was like, I'm actually the candidate tonight. So that's my first step. And so he went through his degrees, but he's a busy man. And his family doesn't necessarily understand masonry. Nothing against them for that, because you don't understand things you don't know. And, you know, to them, it may not mean what it means to us or to him. But he doesn't often get to go down to his lodge. And every time I talk to him about it, one of the reasons why he doesn't go there when he does have the time is he's afraid that they're not going to treat him the same way because he's not there all the time. And I have to tell him, like, listen, it's not like that. You know, we would love to see you there, but at the same time, at the end of the day, you're still my brother, and I still understand that life happens.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So we don't tell you you've got to be there every day. We don't tell you got to be there for everything, unless you volunteer for something that we need you there for, you know. But I mean, it's, it can be tough when life gets in the way.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it happens even with your work and stuff. It just happens.
Yeah, it's very difficult to balance all that. I mean, especially with me being a member of multiple bodies and being secretary or recorder or scribe or whatever you want to call it for different bodies. That's a time suck. I mean, that takes a lot of time. There's times where, like, for instance, on Sunday nights, I'm up till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night putting together the weekly email.
Yeah.
That goes out to the district.
Which you do a fantastic job doing. And let's shout that out real quick so that those brothers that are listening that may not be part of that email know it. So you give the information, tell us about it.
So it's called What's Happening Masonic. It's for District 1 email distribution. So I try and gather as much information in District 1 and the surrounding areas
State
as
of
possible.
Tennessee.
State of Tennessee.
Okay.
Although I do dip a little bit into Mississippi. They send me some information as well.
Right.
About, you know, what's happening, degrees and stuff like that. The easiest way to find it is go to parkavenuelodge.org and go to the members section, and you'll see the newsletter in there. You just click on it, and then you can sign up for it that way. Or, I mean, look for the QR code in every lodge in this area. They've all got it posted up on their walls. So, I mean, it's a great way to keep up track of what's going on. It's also a good way for people to let me know that I've made a mistake. I get that quite often, you know.
Yeah, but they're little things.
They're little things. Like like this week, I forgot to
I saw
duplicated one and forgot to change it to Collierville State.
I saw that Collierville State Meeting didn't get put on there, and I was like, that was a mistake.
Collierville is always really good about letting me know, and I appreciate that. But you know, it's a lot of work to put together something like that. It's a lot of work to. Brian Song in Tennessee is doing a fantastic job.
Shout
with
out
the Grand
to Brian
Lodge.
Song.
Yeah, he's doing a fantastic job with the Grand Lodge newsletter. Unfortunately, his comes out a little bit later than my edition goes out, so I can't link that into mine, unfortunately. But so, you know, there's a lot of great things that are happening in this film as far as being able to engage. That's one thing that the internet has done tremendously well for us, is connecting us as Freemasons.
Once you've joined.
Once you've joined. It's also one of the worst things that's done for us.
Yeah.
I think Facebook is probably one of the worst things that has ever happened to us as Freemasons.
Really?
Because it does connect us, but it also gives us an opportunity to disagree.
Very openly.
Very openly sometimes.
Different than what we would do in the lodge.
Absolutely. Without tempering ourselves. You know, it's so easy to look at that screen and snap back and go, blah, you know, and then not realize that you have just traduced somebody, or if you have just spoken badly about somebody.
And two, things can be taken out of context when it's just words on a screen.
Absolutely.
You know,
when I send an email for business, I always make sure that I provide some kind of context for it, because otherwise you have you can't hear my voice when I send an email.
You can't hear the inflection.
Yeah. And you don't know if I'm mad, sad, happy or just irate or neutral.
And unfortunately, LOL is not proper email, jargon.
You
So,
know, I would love to. I have this theory that in ancient Egypt we wrote with hieroglyphs, and even before that, in ancient Sumeria we had glyphs that we wrote with. We have gone from glyphs to a written language to a spoken language to hieroglyphs again.
yeah, really with emojis and stuff. Yeah,
And I'm for it. I've had whole conversations through text with emojis
same.
and memes. I've had memes conversations back and forth, just responding with a meme to something.
Yeah.
My favorite, just in general, response is thumbs up. Yeah. What does that mean? Does that mean okay? Does that mean you received it? I don't know. So really, you can't. The internet blocks that ability to engage with us on a one-to-one level. It lets us say things that we would never say face-to-face to each other,
Yeah.
and sometimes to our detriment.
Yeah. Because there used to be a time where you would get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And that's how you would learn.
Yeah.
I should be careful about what I say.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that in a threatening way. It's just true.
Nor shed his blood in anger, except in necessary self-defense.
That's right.
Or for the purpose of instruction.
I love that. That's how you put that.
So I think that there are times when, and I've cautioned brothers about this before, and I've been guilty of it myself. I'm not by any means the one that says the one without sin. I've cautioned brothers, and I've said this can only end negatively.
Right.
You can never change someone's mind by a conversation shouting at each other with capital letters and emojis and all that. It'll never happen. Until you sit in the room with someone and face the consequences of your words, you will never, ever, ever have an opportunity to change someone's mind.
And it's much easier to have a conversation with somebody face to face and, kind of try to see things from their perspective and them see things from your perspective. Because you can very quickly form an opinion based on something that you read on a screen about somebody, and it shoots everything down that you now you can't even go have that normal conversation that you would have had, as uncomfortable as it would be sometimes, but it's hard to have that conversation now because you've muddied the waters with something that you said online or that you've done online or something like that. But one of the things I do love about it is, and especially like Buddy's a big poster on Facebook, not a big talker, and several people had told me, they were like, I'm so surprised he spoke as much as he did during your podcast. But he has some great conversations. If you sit down and talk with him, he is just a great conversationalist. But one of the things he does about Facebook is he always posts pictures where he's at and how many brothers were there to help, bring this bring this brother to this next step or whatever it might be.
And when you get talking to him, he's seriously funny.
He is really funny.
Seriously funny.
Which is so ironic. But yeah, so you see him post stuff like that, and then you got lodges that don't want to post anything on their Facebook pages and are afraid to post stuff, and it goes back to the times of, listen, it's not like we can't show, if somebody's okay with their picture being posted on Facebook, then it should be okay.
Yeah.
It's not
some states even forbid it.
Yeah.
There's states out there that do not allow you to post on social media.
Right.
And that's the equivalent of don't flush your hand down the toilet. Well, at some point someone's flushed their hand down the toilet.
Yeah.
So now they have to put a sign above the toilet, don't flush your hand down the toilet.
The warning labels.
The warning labels. So, at some point someone's gotten on Facebook and said something they shouldn't have, which rippled effect all the way through their Grand Lodge. And said, now we have to cut everybody out.
Right.
So you do lose that discourse as well.
Right.
You do lose that ability to have a discourse with brothers.
And I think, too, is for brothers listening that are Masons and stuff, and I think some helpful information for them is to learn that, while the degrees and stuff like that you attend are fantastic, if you're able to attend that stuff, get out there to your monthly stated meetings too, because there are things that we talk about that it's good to have everybody's input on, and what are the next community functions that we plan to do, and what are, is this the direction we should go in? Well, if you're not there and you could have been the decision-making vote, to decide whether we were going to do something or not. And
Yeah.
that's one of the great things about the lodge. We vote on just about everything, and we try to make sure that we're all in agreement, with what we're going to do. We move forward as a group. We don't just let one person pick and choose what we're going to do. And so that's a big, and that helps you in life in general. It helps you understand other people's perspectives. It helps you make a good decision based on facts and not just, feelings. And that makes a big difference. But stated meetings, I don't know how y'all's go. I've never been to a Park Avenue one, but we have a great time at ours. I'm so fortunate. My lodge is just such a good lodge. I love the brothers that are there. Even if we don't always see eye to eye on things, I still love them because of what they bring to the table in every other aspect, But it is a good time, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. So if you're only able to make it to a stated meeting, or if you're only able to make it to a degree, try to switch it up, and try to get to that stated meeting, because we have a good time. We cut up, we laugh. We do talk about bills and the light bill is going to be this amount this month, and we're going to pay that, but we want to make sure we put it, money over here into the scholarship fund. And, so those meetings are important. But if you had to give advice to any lodge right now, what's your 2 top things, or 5 top things, whichever one you want to give?
Engage your members.
Yes.
That's the number one. From the past master who feels like they went from being in charge of everything to being in charge of nothing, find something for that brother to do, whether it's work with a committee, whether it's, helping with the secretary, doing whatever. Engage your members into something. Those members that aren't necessarily officers, find something for them to do, socially or fraternally. Get them involved. And it may not be something that takes a long commitment. It may be something that you meet quarterly or whatever, and get together as brothers and family. Bring family involved into it. One of the coolest things yesterday I went to was in Selmer, Tennessee. We saw the consecration of a new commandery. Very rarely done. Most of them shut down versus reestablish or establish. And one of the things that impressed me the most was the amount of family that was there. It was just, there were almost as many family members there as there were brothers there.
Yeah.
Maybe more. And they are very much engaged in the activities of the lodge.
That's a fantastic lodge, way out in the country, out in Tennessee, and way out in the country. And I saw the pictures I didn't know you were there. I should have known. But I saw Brian was there because he.
No, that was a different one. That was in Lexington, I believe, that morning.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I saw somebody else that's involved in Selmer, and they were there. I probably should have read better, but that Selmer is a very active lodge, even though it's a small town in the middle of nowhere. And I'm sorry for anybody from Selmer that feels opposite. They may be the star on the map, and but you're right. They are very active, and they keep their families very active in it, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and I don't care what size lodge you are, engagement with the family is really important, because we say family first. We say that this should not interfere with our usual avocations. If you can involve your family into it, it won't be. This is not the 1950s anymore. It's not like, oh, Dad's going to the lodge.
And Mom's going to stay home and cook and clean it. Yes,
it's not that anymore. We have to get our families involved. We don't have to force them to get involved, but we should engage them as well. We want them to be involved in it as well. Otherwise, we're going to have Masonic widows, and that's never going to be a good situation.
Yeah. I know a lot of I think I know every active brother that comes to the lodge. I know who their wife is or who their girlfriend might be, and I think everybody's married actually in my lodge at this point. But and we do things outside of lodge together. We do, just like you were saying with Dontrell, putting that together. We do Fifth Fridays, so we get together and we might hang out and play games, or I think you guys went bowling recently, and
we're going to Top Golf next weekend. And
yeah, I might actually. Dontrell had called me and said, "Hey, do you guys want to do some Fifth Friday or some outing with us and have a good time?" And because too, it is important for the lodge members, but but it's also important to, invite some people that are also active and that
Hmm.
their spouses, also know what it's like going through yeah. So I love that stuff. But okay, so what other advice you got? Engagement.
Well, I can put my MBA hat on and look at the lodge from a business standpoint. Um, the biggest failure most lodges have is they don't tell their story. One of the things that we made a conscious decision of is to create a marketing plan. That marketing plan consists of a single marketing image. It's our logo, it's our colors, it's everything that goes into it, just like the brand standard for any company. And then you stick to that. But you get the information out there. And it doesn't matter if it's a small presence or if it's a large presence on social media, whether you've got someone that can do video editing or you've got someone that is podcasting. It's really good to be able to get your message out there, even if it's just a sign on the wall of the lodge saying that you're not an abandoned building. Um, the lodge that comes to mind, in my opinion, as one of the most successful ones in Tennessee is Phoenix Lodge in
Oh,
Nashville.
in Nashville, yeah.
And they do all kinds of stuff. They have symposiums and they have dinners and they have all this other stuff. We went to one recently, the Jeffersonian dinner, which we're going to start having some of those here in Memphis. And it's a fantastic opportunity to engage brothers that have different opinions and get them involved. You can do that for the public as well. If you're not familiar with Jeffersonian dinners, they're a fantastic way to engage a group of people. They're small groups. We had 3 of them. So the lodge is big enough to have 3 different locations, and they have a discussion. It's a guided discussion. You can't talk over anyone. Everyone has the right to speak. Everyone should speak, but you can't speak over them. So there's no crosstalk. So it leads to a very healthy discussion where no one is shouting anyone down.
Now, to be, I guess, devil's advocate there, somebody like me is like, well, Phoenix Lodge is in Nashville. I mean, that's a very large metropolitan, and that they kind of. I mean, it's almost natural for them to be more active because they're in a very large area. So
Yeah.
for us, who I think West Tennessee, and especially in the Memphis area, when we're looking at several, we could put a couple lodges together and not be as big as Phoenix Lodge. So how do you say for those smaller lodges? What do you say to people like them? Like, what do you do for your lodge to make it successful? And it's a tough one.
That's a very tough one. I mean, in many ways, the lodge is not the building. The lodge is the brothers. But the building is important. If you have a building, the building is important, that it should look like a building that's not run down. It's not completely just out of shape. I mean, our building right now is in need of a paint job. It's been 10 years plus since we had a paint job on that, and it's starting to show the age. We're right on a main thoroughfare, so we get a lot of road grime that comes up on it. So we had an awning that was in disrepair for years, and that's been fixed. Getting lighting on the building, putting flags out, putting a sign up, things like that will show to the public that you are an active entity in that building. And because of that, your brothers will take pride in that. The brothers of that lodge will take pride in your facilities. It's very important that you walk in there and you not feel like, oh, this place is run down. Why do I want to be in here? You want to be in a facility that you're proud of,
Right.
that you want to bring people into and show them around. So that's part of it. Whether that's a small country lodge or that's a big city lodge, it doesn't really matter. Now, small country lodges have their own charm, their own unique styles. And most of the small country lodges I've seen are basic in their structure, but they serve that exact purpose. They draw people into it. The other one is engage the community. Find a way to engage the community. And I think that's one of the reasons why Selmer is so active, is because they do engage the community there. They work with them and they do different things there at their lodge. I know Collierville Lodge has all kinds of community activities that they engage with on the square all the time. Park Avenue the same way. So I think that when lodges are tucked away in a far corner and they don't really engage, then that's where you're going to see a decline. That's where you're going to see a lack of interest with the community. It's going to be one of those, hey, what's that building over there? I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's that sort of idea, and then all of a sudden now we're a secretive organization again.
Yeah.
Well, we're not a secretive organization. We're not a secret society.
We are an organization that has secrets.
We are a society that has secrets.
But the secrets are so...
It's no different than any other college fraternity.
I make this joke a lot, is that if you learned what the secrets are, they're kind of laughable because it's not what you would think. It's not like, here's where we're hiding the aliens. Yes. Here's where here's where all the presidents find out about all the shady stuff that the government does. Like, those are not the kind of secrets that we're talking about.
We don't have Masonic gold, although we do have some silver in our safe. But good luck getting into that thing. That thing's so old, I forget the combination. You can't get in it half the time. But it's just a hedge. It's an investment. So I mean, our secrets are essentially the same secrets that college fraternities have. That it's a way of acknowledging each other.
Yes.
And do I care if you know the secrets? And if you're not a Mason, no, I don't care.
Yeah.
I really don't. But I've taken an obligation that I will not reveal the secrets.
Exactly.
And that's the difference. It's a faith and trust.
Well, I will say a lodge locally too that has been making a big strides is Somerville Lodge out in Somerville. And so I don't know if you've seen the building. Do you remember seeing the building prior?
I actually passed by it yesterday and I saw it.
So, it's like they're right there on the square, and you would have never known that was a Masonic lodge. And now they've done a lot of work, and they've got the beautiful sign and the square and compasses on the side of the building. It's backlit. Did you pass it during the day or at night?
Yesterday, but I've seen it. I've seen.
You see the pictures at night, yeah. And they've done a fantastic job out there. And congrats to that lodge and those brothers out there. Love to see you doing that stuff. And Bob Clark, who's out in Selmer, he's also wanting to stay as active as possible and build those lodges up, and along with those brothers in Selmer. So they've all done fantastic jobs. So you're right. The country lodge or big city lodge, there are opportunities for you if you choose to do that. One thing I wanted to circle back to is you were talking about earlier, and then you just brought up again, is like, the ways that we identify each other and blah, blah. So if you're not a brother who's traveled before, be prepared, because when you go somewhere and you've never been there before, they're going to try you, as they should, and you should try them, because there are ways that that we have what's called clandestine lodges and clandestine Masons, and if you don't know that going into it, you will find yourself in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah. And, we got rid of the Book of Lodges. We no longer have that now. We have Amity app,
right,
which you can access, and you have to register for it. Then the secretary of your lodge, hopefully, is also on the Amity app that can approve you. So you can check what lodges are clandestine, what are recognized lodges. But I always, every time I think of the modes of recognition, I always refer back in my head to Monty Python and the skit that they had with the Freemason handshake, and he's just doing this thing, reaching through his legs, and it's hilarious to watch that.
Well, so the first time I ever experienced it, I was in Mississippi, right? And with Memphis being so close to Mississippi, you would think that I have seen a Mississippi degree, or I've been to Mississippi Lodge before, and I had not. And so after I had gotten my master's, I was going on vacation. I was down in Gulfport, and I forgot my dues card. And so that's one of the number one things you can do, is to show your dues card, which is a card that your lodge gives you that basically says he is a current member and, everything's good for the year. And so I'd forgotten it. And, but another way you can go is a brother can vouch for you. Like, I know this brother, or I know somebody that has vouched for this brother. And so we take that, our basically word is bond with us. So if you say something, I'm going to believe you, because we're obligated not to lie to each other. And so I'm down there, and they did not want to let me in. And I'm like in a suit and tie, and it's the middle of July. Or no, sorry, it's the end of July. And I'm like, I did not just dress all the way up here, leave my wife at the Airbnb and come over here to be turned away. Come on, what do I need to do? And so they, through a series of events, they got me through, and okay, and then we're in there, and things happen, and their degree is totally different than what we do, and I'm like, oh no, and I feel like now I'm really going to be out of place because I'm not, seeing things the same way they're seeing them, and so it's weird. But then I went to Texas, and I visited a lodge there. And by the way, in case you didn't know, which I imagine you probably knew since you lived in Texas, down in the outskirts of Houston, suburb, there's a town spelled Humble. Have you been there before?
I have been there, actually.
And
I've taken an ambulance down there, but it's been many years.
So if you've never been there, it's not pronounced humble, which you would think that it's Humble, Texas. It is Humble, Texas. And so when I said the word humble 2 or 3 times, and a brother finally said, I can tell you're not from around here. And I said, why would you say that? And he said, because we keep the H out of humble, or H out of humble. And I said, oh, okay, it makes sense. But that was the first time that I was tried, not just by my dues card, but by a couple other things, and 5 points of fellowship and all that stuff. And I was so nervous that I thought my heart was going to beat out of my chest, all because I was on a work trip and I just wanted to hang out with other brothers. And fortunate for me, and thank you to those brothers, not only at that lodge in Mississippi in Gulfport, but also the one in Humble, that made me feel like I was so welcome. Now, even before they tried me at the Mississippi Lodge, I was very welcomed, and it was a pretty big gathering that day. But in Texas, I mean, from the moment I walked in, I felt welcomed.
Yeah.
And then they tried me and did all the stuff, and then I felt even more better. And I stayed in touch with those guys on Facebook, because there was a point in time we thought we might have to move to Texas for my job. And so I was going to visit as many lodges as I could, and I did. I visited several lodges in the area, and each one of them was just a fantastic experience. And so, it just, for those that are traveling or plan to travel, be prepared, because it's a little nerve-wracking.
It is.
But it's great once you get
I don't
in
know
there.
what it is about Mississippi, because they did the same thing to me.
Really?
And actually, I had to go through all 3 lectures with one lodge I went to. And as it turned out, I went through all 3 lectures. And at the end of it, he says, well, that was great. I'd just never seen any Tennessee work. I wanted to see it, and I was just curious.
Oh, my God.
And it turns out he was the grand senior warden at the time. So it's just...
That's funny.
So we laughed about that afterward.
Mine didn't want to let me leave. When the degree was done, he took me on a tour of the whole building, because it was a Masonic temple. And he took me on a tour and all that stuff. And
Well, that you bring that up. Most people don't realize the difference between a Masonic lodge and a Masonic temple.
perfect.
So a Masonic
it.
lodge is the actual lodge itself, the numbered lodge that contains one lodge only. A Masonic temple is any building that contains multiple bodies within it. So, for instance, Park Avenue Masonic Temple is where we meet, and it contains Park Avenue Lodge, Park Avenue Chapter of Royal Arch Masons, Park Avenue Cryptic Masons, Park Avenue Commandery of Knights Templar. We have Lynn Skinner D. Malay, Midtown Manor Squires, and we used to have Eastern Star and Rainbow Girls and other appendant bodies there as well. So if your lodge is called a temple, it's because you contained one or more bodies in there.
There you go.
More than one body in there.
Yeah, and usually, obviously, the building is typically going to be bigger than your standard lodge, because obviously they're housing more tenants, if you would.
And that's a misconstrued of the name temple. Everyone sees the name temple. If you're not familiar with it, you may think it's a church, but that's just a reference to it being a housing more than one body inside of it.
Right. So, well, listen, I am just so thankful for, our friendship, the brotherhood that we share, and you coming on today and talking to me and telling everybody, a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are. And let's absolutely do this again soon.
Yeah, this is great. We need to have a panel discussion.
I'm telling you,
This would be fantastic.
I got enough chairs. We
I
can do
know.
at least 4, right? So, and we can do somebody videoing in, so we can make it work. But thank you again, Bill, for coming down. And if you want to let everybody know one more time where they can find Park Avenue Lodge, and if they're interested in becoming a culinary expert, where they can find that information as well.
Absolutely. So Park Avenue Lodge is located on the internet at www.parkavenuelodge.org, all spelled out. And we have a pretty aggressive social media presence as well. So you can find us on Instagram at Midtown Freemasons, Midtown Memphis Freemasons. Come check us out. We'd love to talk to you. If you're interested in culinary arts, check out memphis.edu/culinary. And that's Kemmons Wilson Culinary Institute. It's a hospitality program with a concentration in culinary arts. We also have baking and pastry and a lot of other applications in there as well. So it's a fantastic program. It's part of the Kemmons Wilson School of Hospitality and Resort Management for the University of Memphis.
Excellent. So listen, thank you again for coming on, and we'll do it again soon.
All right. Thank you. My
All right.
pleasure.
Thanks.